Hey everyone, welcome to the newest episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. Today's guest joins me from Southern California. He's got a new song out right now called Peace in Paradise, and he's going to be slowly releasing new singles over the next few months. Before we get this episode started, please make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to follow me at onthatnote_podcast and at Parker Whirling. And on that note, please welcome my friend, Tyler Indigo. I'm sitting here with a good friend of mine, Tyler Indigo, who's an indie rock singer-songwriter and producer based out of Southern California. Congratulations on the release of your newest single, Peace in Paradise, which came out August 27th. I'd love to ask you about the writing and recording process and how this all went down, because I've known you for a good while now, a few years, and it's good to catch up with you, but I really want to know about, your process going into this new song, and if it was any different compared to like your previous releases.
Yeah, totally. Even back then when I had made like a scratch demo version that's still like available like on like everything, it's just an acoustic, and I think you remember hearing that live for a long time. It was cool to see the progression with it, because it really just started off as just a basic like acoustic folky kind of vibe, and then like over the years I kind of wanted to find my own sound, and just kind of like figured out like what suits my voice, what's the best environment for it. And then this time around I was working with some buddies and like hit a professional studio, which was completely foreign to me up until this point, and super blown away with it. We were just super hyped about it. It had energy. It was fast paced, and it was like intense, which I don't really think I've attacked as much, which was really interesting to find that avenue of the sound.
Yeah, it is funny that when I heard it, I had forgotten that I knew the song. I heard you play it before and heard the demo. So hearing it and being like, oh, this sounds familiar, but it doesn't, because the production really takes it to a different level. Like, it's a lot more rock than I remember. And then I went and listened to the demo again. I was like, oh yeah, this is like, sounds kind of sweet, kind of like you were saying, a little folky. So I like that you took it a completely different direction. Was that something that you always had in mind, or did it sort of accidentally, like one of those happy accidents?
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of like being able to like bend a song too. Like even sometimes I still enjoy playing it that folky style, and then like sometimes I like playing it that more rocky style. And I think that's like, it's fun to have that kind of that like to be able to stretch it like that, because depending on like the setting, if you're playing like at a coffee house, maybe you can play like the folky version, or if you're playing a more like bar, kind of like more of a punky situation, you could have it be a little bit more intense. And I think I just liked being able to go from there all the way to there.
Yeah, it really is polar opposites, and that's an interesting way of putting it. Like, you might be playing in a coffee shop, you might be playing in a brewery or something like that.
Yeah.
And it is like two sides of the same coin. When you were doing the production for this song, Peace in Paradise, what was like the average day in the studio looking like for you?
Yeah, like shout out to the Haig, owner at Blue Rose Recording Studio. That's where we recorded it at. And I had brought it to him, and it was almost like, it was so foreign to me, because like I had always, as I said, I'd always recorded in my garage, and then going into a studio, you think you have everything all figured out. Like you think this is going to work with that. And then especially with like analog recording, which was the first time I had done that, it was like every kind of, you kind of hear anything that's off that you thought would have worked before. So it was cool, like having more people to work with it to make it like the desired sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So that collaboration really brought out a different side of the song to you.
Yeah, totally. And it's just those tiny little details that, I haven't really focused on until I got to this song, got to work on it with everyone who worked on it. It was just super proud feeling.
That's awesome. So
yeah.
you have had a lot of phases in the way you approach recording.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, was this your first time at this studio, or had you been going before?
Yeah, this is the first time at that studio, and just in any like professional like setting in particular.
So, what was the feeling going in for the first time? Was it intimidating at all? Was it like really exciting?
I was super nervous. I remember like the whole time. I mean, I'm super hard on myself the whole time. I'm just like, oh, like what if this doesn't work? And that's always like the fear of going into a studio. I feel like is that fear of it might not working. So it was just surreal, and it was just super fun too at the same time.
Yeah, it can be definitely a little nerve-wracking going into a studio like that. Well, one, you're paying money, so
Absolutely,
you're worried about time. You're worried about getting everything in on time. You don't want to waste anybody else's time, and you don't want to waste your money. But you also want to be smart about how you get this song done, because it's kind of like not a one and done situation, but you want to make that money and that time really worth it. So you do have to be kind of picky, but you also don't want to be closed off to the ideas that your producers are throwing at you as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure like you know how it is, like or anybody who like writes music, the least pressure possible, the better it will come out.
Right. Sometimes it's you don't need to like fight that feeling. It's sometimes like the good things just come easily, which is something to pay attention to when they do.
Yeah, totally.
So what would you say is your favorite part of the creation process, like between writing, recording, maybe even the release process or like the music videos?
I would say that I always hope for it to be a little bit new and keep it like exciting with what you do, just because once you start getting bored with the way you do things, it can work against you. In particular with like a song like this, and I'm just a huge fan of like I love it when songs come to you out of nowhere. Like this song in particular was made in the middle of like a loading screen. I remember exactly what I was doing of like a video game.
Oh,
And
funny.
yeah, and I was just like playing like some chords and like the wake up, I really wanna know. That was like the first thing that came out of me. And like from there on, like it wrote itself. It was like I've never really had it, even to this day. I mean, you hope for that, but such an effortless go is like such a blessing, you know?
Absolutely. It is a blessing, and it's something that when it comes, you don't want to put down your guitar. You don't want to like take a break. You need to I feel like I need to finish this. It's almost like your brain is an antenna into like this ether where
Right.
this song exists, and all of a sudden you picked up on it and you got to like write it down, figure it out before it's gone. Because
Totally.
it's so scary to think that as you're writing it, I'm like, oh God, like I hope I can finish this. I hope I can do this all before I like lose that creative sense or whatever.
Yeah, it's such a meditative state. I mean, like, and it's so funny too, because like when you start doing it, and then it like you start thinking about it, like, oh, this is it, like this is like dope, and then you just like, oh, it's going away,
Yeah.
it's like staying in that zone, which I think over years of practicing, we all develop that kind of just like we don't control it, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't control it, but you can feel it when you're in it. And
Yeah.
you like start to realize what that feeling is like so that you can ride the wave.
Exactly.
So
What it's like.
I've known you for a good while, and I still remember to this day when I first met you and we were talking about music and we were talking about writing and recording. And you said that you showed me some songs of yours that I thought were really cool. And I asked you what DAW you were using, like Logic or Ableton and all that.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I actually have this digital recording studio, and I don't know what it was, but I was like just shocked that you did everything in the box. You didn't
Yeah.
take anything to the computer, which is just nuts.
Yeah, it was, and up to that point, like I had no idea. It was just kind of like my uncle had given me like an 8-track Tascam, from like the early 2000s, late 90s. And I remember kind of feeling like that going to a computer was foreign to me because I was like working on that thing for a couple years. And I think that's where I really was able to own in on my own, mixing, like kind of like becoming decent at it. And it was that thing, even to this day, though, it just has a particular sound.
Yeah.
Everything has its own vibe, no matter what you record it on.
Well, it's funny to think that the way, like, we don't all start the same way. Some people start on GarageBand, some people start on an 8-track, like you're saying. And I think it really just is almost like a nature versus nurture kind of situation where the way you learn ends up impacting you way down the line. Like if you start with this one thing, even if you start playing bass guitar instead of drums or guitar, like your first instrument's bass guitar, that's going to totally affect the way you play other instruments in the future and the way you think about rhythm and things like that. So it's cool that you had a pretty different experience than probably most people in our generation when it comes to recording and mixing and actually working on a Tascam 8-track before anything else. And then you can take all of that into Logic or Ableton or whatever you use in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. You make a great point about you become your own like Rubik's Cube, I guess. Like that's like I really like what you said with the depending on what instrument you really like learn the most on or what you started on, it really develops you. I mean, that's why it's like, people that's like bass guitar to me is like such an interesting one. Like when people learn on that and are songwriters, like the Beach Boys, like with Brian Wilson, it's just like you can tell that there's just a certain difference in people's approach.
Yeah. Or like I think of Paul McCartney being one of the best bassists of all time. People don't really think about that. They think about him as one of the best singers or songwriters. And of course that's true, but you don't hear as much conversation about how amazing of a bassist he is. But that's just like kind of the magic of being such a great songwriter and such a great singer. It makes sense that it would transition in such a kind of a weird subconscious way maybe into the way he plays bass. Speaking of transition, so the reason why I brought this up is, you have transitioned from doing just like a digital or a 8-track recording module, if you will.
Right, yeah.
And then taking it to your garage studio and working in there, and now working in like more of a real studio setting. So which one do you prefer? And in general, what are the pros and cons of each of those?
That's such a good question because each one has its own spirit to it. I feel like sometimes I'm a little bit more proud towards the end of like the higher end studio stuff, especially when you pull it off. I think you obviously have more of a comfortability when you're doing it out of your garage or anything outside of like a professional setting. But the thing in particular I love about getting into the studio is that it's just, you just feel like every second is just like your last second of like making a track. It's like there's some sort of visceral vibe in there. Whereas like sometimes I'll make stuff out of my garage and it'll be like dope, but it comes off as like maybe a little lazy or a little bit just not as like focused. And then when you like, and then your brain obviously tells you once you hit the studio, it's like, all right, this is go time. Like,
yeah,
I think that's just a natural thing. That's how I felt anyway.
Huh. Yeah, that makes sense. You get into that environment and something about like your body just changes. You're like, okay, we're like in this now. We got to make this sound good because this is where the shit happens in a studio. Whereas if you're just in your living room or your bedroom or whatever, it's like you said, there's a level of comfortability where you can just put it down, come back to it later if you want. But when you're in the studio, you're in it. You're in it.
Yeah, you dive right in. Which is, I mean, like, again, experiencing that, especially with the people that were working on it, like with Haig, I mean, like a great coach too. That's the good thing about like, if you go into a studio and someone's helping you out too, you kind of have somebody facilitating you and like not exactly like intruding, but like bringing what's going on in your head onto the audio recording.
Yeah. So since you've worked with him, what's his name? Haig?
Hi, yeah. He releases music too out of there, and it's really good stuff. I
Okay,
recommend
sick.
checking him out sometime.
Yeah, it's really important to have someone who, when you're collaborating with them, you really trust their opinion and they understand the kinds of things you want, the kinds of things you want to be able to express without encroaching too much. So what would you say are some really important things he's taught you, or some really important traits that somebody else would want to see in a collaborative partner or a mentor almost?
Yeah, I think there's such a unique thing, and like I've seen it with you too, and I've seen it with a bunch of people we've been, like surrounded ourselves with. There's such like a universal pull to people who they're open to ideas, and you can tell it's kind of just like it's like no one's trying to impede, when it comes down to like a collaboration, like a good collaboration. People, it's a joint effort. Like we're trying to get the greatest version of what the song could be. And plenty of times where you work with people sometimes and you can feel like almost like a presence of like it needs to be this way instead of could it be this way. And like I think that's huge, because it's really about being open-minded, and as you don't want to have any pressure. You don't want to have to feel like because this person thinks it should be this way, it should be that way. It's just kind of like, let's all work together and just try and get it to sound amazing.
Yeah, everybody needs to understand that we're on the same page here. Like when the visions align, that's when the real stuff comes through, instead of there being any sort of ego about like, oh, I want my idea to be in there, or I don't know, just somebody who might want to control it. Like it shouldn't be a controlling thing. It should be an exploration, and we're all doing this together. We're all trying to do what's best for the song. And if that means somebody else has a different idea than what you have, your response should just be something like, okay, let's try it. It doesn't mean it's permanent. And if you are the person who is suggesting it and the other person has a good attitude about saying, okay, let's try it, well, then you should be honest with yourself if once you do it, it doesn't sound as good as you were hoping, and don't just stick to something because you feel like you don't want to be wrong.
Yeah. It's almost like an unspoken democracy in a little bit. It's like everybody, it's like, it's kind of like it's always there. Like as far as like when it's like good, it's just like everybody's just trying to get to the greatest thing they can make. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that too.
It's about a mutual self-respect when you're collaborating. And I do have to tie in this with our other friend, no one else but Rico Morales.
Ricky, yeah.
Shout out to Ricky Ticky. He's the man. Also, shout out to Evan Odinsoff and Ethan Ardelin.
Yeah, shout out to those guys, boys. True artists. Yeah.
Ethan was the first guest on here, so it's funny to be talking to you now, 88 episodes later.
Congrats on that, dude.
Thank you,
Great podcast, man. Yeah.
No, you guys have been very supportive from the very beginning, and that really ties into what we're saying now about having a good community of people around you who have respect for you and who you respect their ideas, and where you just want to build each other up, because it can be hard to find other artists in general to be around and enjoy creating stuff with, let alone finding artists who you really love their stuff, and working on things with them is just a pleasure. So when you do find that, you want to keep that community going. And we're lucky to live in this day and age where you and I can do this over Zoom, and I can hit up Ricky across the country and Ethan, and it's like just so nice that we get to be able to do this virtually.
Yeah, what a blessing too. I mean, like it's such a trip, because it's just like everyone's so like open-minded, and so like like work like with all of our friends. It's just like it's surreal. Like, especially just like the little ways you meet people. Like, I met Ricky through work, and then like out of nowhere, just met all you guys. It's just like those are the the small blessings in life, big blessings. I mean,
Yeah, you got to count your blessings, especially in this day and age where it's hard. And I think in our age right now, it can be hard to like find true friends that really have the best interests at heart, and you have the same mutual respect for each other. And then on top of that, being able to geek out about music all the time with.
just another bonus, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Tyler, that's basically the first half of the interview. We're going to go into the last 5 here, where I'm just going to ask you 5 quick questions and we'll be done.
Cool, Parker. Thank you, bro.
Of course. Question number 1 is in the studio or playing live?
I got to go with playing live. It's so funny because sometimes I'll like hear myself playing live and I'm like, dude, why can't like I sing like that in the studio? I think that's just me. I've always been such a in the moment, kind of like in the pocket kind of person. Just being there, being able to, because those nerves, like you feel that, like, and you can't beat that feeling. Like, if you can close your eyes in the studio and do a live performance like as it was, I mean, I think a lot of people would get like really good stuff. I think the difficult part is turning on that side of you in the studio.
Yeah, they are totally different beasts. Being live, like that is a very electrifying feeling that you can't really get in the studio. You can get I get the feeling of like that meditative state when things are clicking and they're working out, and then you take a moment to hear it all back and you're like, holy shit, I can't believe this is real. But
yeah, you're like, I did that.
Yeah, and it's amazing, but it's not the same as that immediate electrifying gratification almost when you are playing live.
Yeah, and you can just tell too, like when like you're on it live, it's just like people give you that look, and nothing like it.
Exactly. Question number 2 is, what do you think is a perfect album front to back?
I mean, you're probably going to already expect this, but Is This It by The Strokes?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you do have some Strokes vibes going on. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on for days, but that's just, there's just something about that album that will always speak to me. So, I mean, I could name so many more, but that's the one right off the bat.
Yeah, it is a perfect album, and it's crazy to think it came out in 2001. I wish I could have been there, like, or in my early 20s or late teens when that came out, because I was 4 or 5. But I just can't even imagine what the cultural response was to that. Like, I feel like it was just such a cool moment.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, there's just those albums in life that like they almost sound like they can come out today and still be just as like insane. Like, and those are like real like pieces of art that are just, it still stands up today.
Right. Did you like their new album?
I enjoyed some of the tracks. I always like hearing, especially with like bands these days, like that have such like a legacy like that. It's like there's bits and pieces I like, but there's just something about those first couple albums that it's just like every bit is perfect. It's not like there's no potholes.
Right. Well, I can't imagine what it's like to make such a cultural imprint for your first 2 albums and then have to always have that legacy behind you for good and for bad. Like, people will always compare your newest work to your previous hits.
Totally.
And that, that can kind of suck. I'm sure that can be a lot of pressure. With that being said, I really loved the new album, the new Abnormal.
I loved it too.
I would probably say it's my favorite next to Is This It, I would say. It's hard for me to really say, because once a new album comes out, I have a thing about whether if I love this artist, and I have loved them for a while, it's almost hard for me to want to go back and listen to the old stuff once the new one is out, and that's like all I want to hear. And so it's hard for me to say right now if the new Abnormal is my favorite, but for a while I did say it was, just because I thought it was so different compared to every other thing they had released. Like,
I agree.
At the Door being like a 6-minute kind of slow burn song. I love
Ballad,
that
yeah.
song. But there's just no other song that like that on any of their other albums. So maybe it's just the newness of it that makes me think it's the best. But I think in general, nothing will probably touch Is This It?
Yeah, and that's like one of those things too, of like the perfect timing, the perfect recording, just planets align. That's almost like out of, like, not just them, of course. It's like any artist. It's like they're like bigger than themselves in those moments, if that makes sense. They're like it's musicians. It's all musicianship, and it all comes down to their their skill sets. But there's just something about energy. I mean, like a planets aligning, like just perfect moment.
Yeah, like a cultural zeitgeist, kind of like Nirvana, Kurt Cobain.
Right, totally.
Like he just symbolized everything about that youthful grunge time. That if he kept, if he was with us still and kept making other albums, maybe they would be great. But it's like nothing will touch Nevermind.
Yeah, it's just, it can't, and it's not even by like, like I'm sure, of course, like artists get upset about that, but I'm sure deep down they know it's just like that's the beautiful thing. It's out of their control. It's like it's crazy.
It's scary.
Life's a trip in that way. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like we're bigger than ourselves. We don't realize how like unegotistical that is, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. But of course, it's hard to separate the ego with that, because you want people to like your stuff, and you don't want people to not like it.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you do get what you want, suddenly you think maybe you deserve that every time, and it's not. Like you said, it's bigger than you. Like when it becomes such a cultural moment for the world, it's not really about you anymore. I mean, you're the kind of like just what's the word?
Vessel, I guess.
Yes, the vessel. Yeah. Exactly what I was looking for. You're just the vessel for this new time that people are going to go through, and this new way of thinking.
Yeah, that's a trip.
Definitely a trip. So question number 3 is, who's your dream artist or producer to work with?
Dream artist and producer. I don't know about a dream producer, except for like, like the Holy Grails, like, Rick Rubin and all those guys, and Dr. Dre even. I mean, and you said musicians to work with? Is that what you're saying? I almost would want to like work with like the guys from like Sublime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of that stylistic like approach. That like, and the singer's obviously been gone for a really long time, but I mean that band too. Just because the bassist and the drummer are still alive. I think just their back groove in that band was just like, I think those guys, especially the SoCal scene that like it started from that. I mean, yeah, probably those guys.
It's funny. I'm pretty uneducated with Sublime, and I hear a lot about them from other artists and how influential they were on them, and that makes sense with you now that you say that. I really only know like Santeria, but I would imagine that vibe fits. I mean, it fits really well with what you're doing, which makes sense. I would like to see a little collaboration in the future.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm hoping to like have like make more hip hoppy stuff too. I mean, you do that in particular. Also, you have that huge range. Like as far as like you have a rock song, and then you'll have like a trap style like track too. I mean, like I think that's why I was hugely inspired by Sublime, was just that. Those kind of things.
That ability to stretch yourself.
Yeah, just play like, sound like almost like not a completely different band, but just like, I think it challenges people a little bit in a good way.
Yeah, I think people nowadays are probably more open to that than maybe they were in earlier decades, because there's so much, like, because of the internet, we can listen to, music that's playing in Zimbabwe if we want. Like,
Right.
it's crazy. So you can get influence from everything, not even just music, but you can get influence from video games or movies. Like, there's so much to take influence from
Information.
that it only makes sense that we don't have to limit ourselves to, like, oh, I'm only an indie pop artist. It's like, well, you can do anything that feels good. And I think in general, people are relatively accepting of that idea that you're not just one thing and that you can
Right.
change it up.
Yeah, especially today. I mean, like boxes. I mean, that's not like boxes and labels. That just doesn't make sense today.
No, and people are
Yeah.
constantly changing. I mean, I like to think people understand that and vibe with that. I do. Like, I'd rather an artist change completely on the next album, even if it's not my cup of tea, just because I
Yeah.
love the idea of people, especially once they've found a lot of success in one genre or whatever, to break that idea and, change themselves. Because even if that next thing is not exactly well received, I think usually that energy will be better directed next time. It's like, at
Yeah.
least they didn't try to just make people happy. Like,
It's
they
like
did
it's
what they
real.
wanted to do.
Yeah, it's very real. It's because you can. I mean, there's plenty of examples of like artists who like will release stuff, and you're like, oh, you're like, oh, you're definitely were not exploring like this avenue. It's
Right.
like listeners have like a stronger sense of what you're doing than like you do a lot of the time. I feel like.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Probably so, because I mean, you listen to your stuff and then it's out, and then you don't really want to listen to it again. But other
Yeah,
people
yeah.
don't hear it like that. They want to listen to it all the time.
It's also like that kind of like that disconnect, like because like it must be such a trip for people to like hear your music and like take in your character when you're like you've been there the whole time, you've been creating it, and it's like I can only imagine all my favorite artists and all your favorite artists like feel the same way, where it's like you feel like they're a friend, but then they're just like, oh, well, that's just me, like.
Right.
So that's crazy.
It is. Question number 4 is, what's on your musical rotation right now?
Oof. It's funny because when I'm like releasing stuff and like super busy, like I haven't been spending as much time listening to a lot of music, and that I can always tell that always gets to me. My mood's always out of whack when I'm not listening to like even new stuff. I've had a serious like oldies phase recently too. If I have been listening to anything, like, have you heard of like Ella Fitzgerald and like all those
Yeah.
like those old school like jazz singers? I'm a big fan of. So like stuff like that. What else have I been listening to? Nowadays, like I have my library is so vast, I just press shuffle and like whatever like comes on,
Whatever
I really
comes up.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if I like the song like that I downloaded 10 years ago, I'll take a quick picture and be like, I gotta hop back on that.
Right. That's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah. I don't do that as often as I should. I usually try to pick an album and then go for that or whatever new song that I want to hear. But
Yeah.
but it is fun to like basically shuffle every song that you were a fan of over the last 20 years and just see
Yeah.
what comes up, because you'll be reminded of like this song you listened to all the time when you were 5, and now that you're
Yeah.
older you have a different appreciation for it, and you're like, oh wait, this is actually pretty sick, even though I don't listen to it that much anymore.
Yeah, totally. Also, the interesting thing with that too is like sometimes you'll be attracted to a song because you'll be like, oh, I like the vocal melody, and then you download it, and then like you come back and it comes on in your car, and you're like, oh, like the bass line's sick, like
Yeah.
the drum beat's sick. Now I see how it all works, and it's like it's always a cool lesson, just stuff like that. Like you gain so much inspiration from just hearing like a little bass line under like a vocal melody you might have liked down the line, and just little stuff like that.
Do you feel like there are any songs you listened to as a kid or any artists you listened to as like a child that you think low-key influence the way you like to write now?
Yeah, totally. I think obviously like all the two like Sublime and the Strokes, but I mean like just I know I was a big like when I was just so much younger. Like I think like I'm sure you can attest to this. Our like generation was built on like just CDs in the car driving around with our parents, and
Yeah.
it was always just like good pop songs, man. It was just like the kind of stuff that like it's just nostalgic and like you can't help but it's like a warm summer day and you're driving and Fleetwood Mac's coming on like on your stereo, and it's just like it's almost like a part of us when we're growing up because it was just it was so embedded in our culture and just like that type of music, and it's such fond memories. So I think that was, if that answers the question. I don't know if I trailed off there, but
No, it's yeah. I mean, it's maybe less of a single band or song and more of the way we consumed music when we were younger. Kind of just listening to whatever our parents were listening to in the car or at home. And
totally.
usually our parents, I mean, everyone's got different parents, obviously, and different tastes. But I think in general, they probably grew up with more of an appreciation for like pop songs and like hits. And nowadays, it's so easy to listen to anything and everything that you're not subjected to just the radio, like what
Yeah.
they say is the hits. So it's almost like we all have this DNA of really like catchy hooks and very well produced things, and not as many lo-fi tracks maybe.
Yeah, God, I do love lo-fi tracks though.
Yeah, same.
Like gained so much inspiration even just from like a relaxing beat, and it's like, yeah, yeah, I'm just such a huge fan of that style of music too because there's such a realness to it. Also, that you can't really beat on like well produced things. I
Right.
think that a lot of times that's like my dilemma is like, oh, it sounds clean, but a little too good. A little, I want to maybe dirty it up a little bit.
Yeah, that's a hard balance to find.
Yeah, especially today.
Yeah. Question number 5 is, what's your favorite decade of music?
I can give quite a few different answers. I mean, I would say right now would probably, or during the 2010s. I think I don't think people realize how much underground music we have as far as like beautiful finds. I think like the sky, it's like an ocean of good music out there right now that like, I mean, if I am listening, that's the cool thing about Spotify and these playlistings too. It like recommends stuff to you, and you get to get turned on by all these great new artists. But besides that, with like the freedom of the internet, like back then, I would say probably the 90s.
90s, yeah. I, for
90s
some
or
reason,
60s.
would have guessed that for you. 60s for sure, but 90s I definitely see.
Yeah, I just loved everyone got clumped together like an alternative band, but I mean like Chili Peppers, Nirvana, like Oasis, like Weezer. I mean, and then you also just had like huge waves of hip hop. I mean, it was just good. It was just good, honest music.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Tyler Indigo, that is our time here on that note. Thanks for
Thank you,
joining
Parker.
me for an episode. It's been a pleasure getting to talk with you about your new song, Peace in Paradise, which everybody needs to go check out. And
Peace in
you
Paradise.
told me that you have 3 new songs coming out over the next few months. Is that true?
Yeah. Up until around November, December, I'm going to be releasing singles. A couple of them we've all heard before, kind of like reprises of like the tracks like Peace in Paradise. There's one new one though that I'm releasing at the very end. I think everybody's going to be stoked to hear that one. It's the new favorite and the latest one I've made with Haig and all those guys. So I'm excited for that one to be received.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I'm stoked to hear them all, man. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
everybody
excited.
needs to go check out Peace in Paradise. Like I said, it's a great, like, driving down Malibu kind of song.
Yeah, totally.
Great vibes. But yeah, thank you again for joining me, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Parker. Thank you so much for having me, man. It's good catching up with you too. Miss
Always
you.
good catching up. Miss you guys too. I hope one day I'll come out back to LA for a little bit, just for vacation or something.
No, totally, bro. Anytime you're back in town, you got to hit us up.
Yes, let's
grab a
do
beer.
it, man. We'll get in the studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, dude. I'll talk to you later. See you,
All right.
Tyler.
Catch you later, brother.
Thank you again for joining me for another episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. If you haven't yet, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and you can even leave a comment down below to let me know who you're listening to. On that note, I'll see you guys next time.